touting what he calls a victory in the impeachment hoax after the Senate voted to acquit him yesterday. He just spoke at the White House. Take a listen.
We went through hell unfairly, did nothing wrong, did nothing wrong. I've done things wrong in my life, I will admit. Not purposely, but I've done things wrong. But this is what the end result is.
How did that speech come across? Does it seem like he'll be able to put this behind him? Let's ask our A-plus panel for the day, author and Newsmax contributor Tom Basile and former advisor to President Obama, Jamar Brown. Jamar, let me start with you. How did you take his speech?
Well, I think that, and thank you for having me, and I think that one of the things about the speech is, it's very arrogant speech. I think it's a speech, about speaking to his base, making sure that his base feels that he hadn't done anything wrong. The facts were very clear throughout the entire investigation and throughout the entire trial that wrongdoing had been done, and that, unfortunately, senators followed the party line, and therefore there wasn't any accountability. And so that's mostly what I think about the speech. And I just think that it's the wrong tone to send that, the leader of the free world can basically have all the information, against, him in that particular situation, but that he is acquitted. And I think it sends the wrong message to the country.
Yeah. Now, Tom, he also was citing certain people that he's obviously still angry about and has said, people should pay for what they did. How do you think that manifests itself? I mean, we might be familiar with the Nixon's enemies list. I mean, is he going beyond?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's a critically wrong thing to do. I think that as someone who is supposed to be president of the United States, holding that office in the highest honor, to really worry about, trying to get people back and to follow up on, threats to particular people. But I think that also leads to a lot of why the vote happened the way that it does.
Let's give Tom a chance to register. What are your thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, sure. Look, I appreciated the fact that the president wanted to thank his supporters, thank his family, but this kind of turned into a little bit of a Festivus airing of grievances. And what's become very clear is that the American people want to move on from impeachment. They've thought for months that this was going to be a complete waste of time, and the president is riding high. He's got great poll numbers right now, better than President Barack Obama's numbers at this point in his presidency. And what he needs to do is move on from this and continue that very positive, very upbeat agenda that we heard on Tuesday night in the State of the Union. That's the way that he's going to be able to continue this positive momentum that he continues to see with voters. And while the Democrats are saying, Jerry Nadler and others saying, we're going to try again, we're going to continue the investigation, we're going to double down on this failed strategy and abdicate our responsibility to the American people on a whole wide range of issues. Yeah. So I'd like to see this kind of be the end of it. I don't think it will be, but I personally think the president does need to move on and talk about what he's done for this country and his agenda moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. If we see more investigations, I think people may be very frustrated. It's funny you used the term Festivus. We were describing it in the same way, Tom. So you're not alone in thinking that. I want to show both of you gentlemen this, our meme of the day. The internet had plenty of reaction to Nancy Pelosi's now famous speech rip. Conservative cartoonist Gary Varvel had his own take on the State of the Union moment with this illustration. It's kind of Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians, but her name is Cruella Pelosi. She's throwing around the scraps from her speech after having to sit through Trump's State of the Union, and Trump doesn't seem to take notice, maybe doesn't care. Jamar, what do you think about that? I mean, does this backfire on Pelosi?
Well, I think that it doesn't necessarily immediately backfire on Pelosi. I think one of the things that's very important also to consider in all of this is that, this president has torn apart families. This president has worked to tear apart communities, tear apart opportunities for jobs and business and economic growth. And so, tearing a sheet of paper, folks may want to talk about that, and that may be the song and dance of the day. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this president's policies are tearing apart this country. And that's what we need to be talking about, both as a response to the State of the Union, also and in this critical election that's happening.
Well, let's take a step back, Tom. Yeah, fair enough, Jamar. Tom, let's take a step back. This isn't getting better. And American people, I think you've even said they're kind of frustrated with all this, so they want to move on. And I think to that end, maybe they should try to close the gap and get along a little bit. I mean, how are they going to get anything done together with this angst between them?
You know, this morning, Nancy Pelosi gave a press conference where she even criticized the guests that the president had at the State of the Union. And you look at the bitter, angry faces of Democrats who sat in that chamber when the president was talking about record low unemployment, when he's talking about an agenda that would provide, you know, better opportunity, educational opportunity and economic opportunity for communities of color in this country, and they sat there on their hands. I think it is a little bit of Cruella de Vil, and I don't think that it gets better for Democrats if they're going to continue to double down on this type of strategy. But the president does need to lead in this respect as well. To my earlier point, that he has a very positive agenda, he has a record of accomplishment, and that's really what the American people, particularly independents, want to hear from and want to hear about over the next number of months.
Jamar, how is that accomplished? I mean, I kind of look back on the 80s when you had Reagan actually working with Tip O'Neill. They got some things done, but that seems like such a different world. How do we get back to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very difficult place to be in. You have a president that has denigrated leaders. You have a president that's disrespected leaders. It's very hard to work with people when you feel like they won't work with you. And so I think there's one of the pieces.
And that might go both ways, Jamar. With all fairness, that might go both
directions. Ways. It really does.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'd love to see us start working together again, but
I would too.
I don't see any signs yet that's going to happen. But gentlemen,
it's only fair for the country for us all to work together.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
However, our politics has gotten very polarized.
I know.
That's what people want to
There are
see.
many reasons for it, and we'll talk more later in the program. Thank you so much, Tom and Jamar. Coming up, we're going to take a look at how the president's winning